The United Nations' recent call for security guarantees before monitoring a ceasefire in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, underscores the complexity of implementing peace in one of Africa's most volatile conflict zones. The request reflects both operational necessity and political caution. In a region where armed groups remain active, territorial control is contested, and ceasefires have historically collapsed, the UN has made it clear that it cannot effectively deploy personnel, aircraft, and surveillance tools without firm assurances from all parties involved. The situation highlights the broader challenges of modern peacekeeping, where mandates often outpace the realities on the ground. Eastern Congo has endured decades of instability rooted in the aftermath of the 1994 Rwandan genocide, regional wars in the late 1990s, ethnic tensions, competition over land and resources, and the proliferation of armed militias. Although formal peace agreements have been signed over the years, violence has persisted, particularly in the provinces of North Kivu and South Kivu. These regions are rich in minerals such as coltan, gold and tin, resources that have fueled both local and foreign interests. Armed groups have frequently used mineral revenues to sustain their operations, further entrenching insecurity. The most recent escalation centres on the March 23rd movement, commonly known as M23. The group first emerged in 2012, claiming that the Congolese government had failed to honour a previous peace agreement signed on March 23, 2009. After being militarily defeated and lying relatively dormant for years, M23 resurfaced in late 2021 and quickly began seizing territory in eastern Congo. The group's resurgence has dramatically shifted the security landscape, with clashes between M23 fighters and the Congolese armed forces displacing thousands of civilians and destabilizing key urban centres. The capture of strategic areas, including the provincial capital of Goma, represented a major blow to the Congolese government. Goma is not only an administrative hub, but also a critical economic and logistical centre near the Rwandan border. Its airport serves as a lifeline for humanitarian operations and military logistics. The loss or closure of such infrastructure complicates both national defence and international peacekeeping efforts. The fighting has disrupted daily life, weakened markets, and forced communities to adapt to the presence of armed actors. Amid mounting international pressure, diplomatic efforts intensified. Regional organizations, alongside international partners such as the United States and Qatar, facilitated negotiations aimed at halting hostilities. These talks culminated in a ceasefire agreement and the establishment of a proposed monitoring and verification mechanism. The idea behind such a mechanism is straightforward. Neutral observers verify compliance, investigate violations, and help build confidence between former adversaries. In theory, monitoring reduces mistrust and deters parties from resuming violence. However, translating theory into practice in eastern Congo is far from simple. The United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, MONUSCO, one of the UN's largest and longest-running peacekeeping operations, would play a central role in monitoring the ceasefire. MONUSCO has thousands of peacekeepers deployed across the country, tasked with protecting civilians, supporting government stabilization efforts, and facilitating humanitarian assistance. Its mandate has been renewed multiple times, reflecting both the persistence of conflict and the international community's commitment to Congo's stability. Yet MONUSCO operates in an increasingly hostile environment. Armed groups have at times targeted peacekeepers directly, and there have been instances of restricted movement and interference with surveillance operations. Modern conflicts often involve drones, electronic jamming, and advanced weaponry, raising new risks for peace operations. UN officials have expressed concern that aircraft or helicopters deployed for monitoring could be threatened by hostile actions. Without explicit guarantees that such assets will not be attacked or obstructed, deployment would place personnel at unacceptable risk. Security guarantees in this context mean more than verbal assurances. They require concrete commitments from all belligerents to cease offensive operations, refrain from targeting UN forces, and allow unrestricted access to areas under their control. They also imply cooperation in reopening and securing critical infrastructure, such as airports and major roads, to facilitate the movement of observers. Without freedom of movement and operational safety, ceasefire monitoring becomes symbolic rather than substantive. The fragility of the current ceasefire compounds the challenge. Even as diplomatic agreements are announced, sporadic clashes continue in some areas. Ceasefires in complex conflicts are often violated, whether deliberately or due to poor command and control within armed groups. Fragmented chains of command can lead to rogue units engaging in skirmishes that undermine broader political commitments. In eastern Congo, where multiple armed factions operate with varying degrees of discipline, ensuring uniform compliance is particularly difficult. Political dynamics further complicate the picture. The conflict in eastern Congo is intertwined with regional rivalries, especially tensions between the DRC and Rwanda. Kinshasa has repeatedly accused Kigali of supporting M23, while Rwanda has denied direct involvement and raised its own security concerns. These accusations and counter-accusations create an atmosphere of mistrust that spills over into peace negotiations. Any monitoring mechanism must navigate these sensitivities carefully to maintain neutrality and credibility. The Congolese government itself faces internal pressures. Public frustration with insecurity has at times been directed not only at armed groups, but also at MONUSCO, with some communities questioning the effectiveness of the peacekeeping mission. Protests against the UN presence have occurred in the past, reflecting perceptions that peacekeepers have failed to prevent violence. As MONUSCO gradually prepares for a phased withdrawal in coordination with the government, its role in monitoring the ceasefire becomes even more delicate. It must demonstrate effectiveness while also managing expectations. For armed groups like M23, agreeing to security guarantees is both a tactical and political decision. On one hand, cooperation with international monitors can lend an image of legitimacy and commitment to dialogue. On the other hand, relinquishing tactical advantages or allowing scrutiny of positions may be perceived as weakening leverage. The calculus for such groups often balances short-term military gains against longer-term political recognition. The humanitarian dimension adds urgency to the situation. Eastern Congo hosts one of the world's largest internally displaced populations. Repeated cycles of violence have forced families to flee multiple times, disrupting education, healthcare, and livelihoods. Markets close during clashes, agricultural production declines, and humanitarian agencies struggle to reach those in need. A credible ceasefire, effectively monitored, could provide breathing space for recovery. Conversely, a failed monitoring effort could erode hope and deepen suffering. The UN's insistence on security guarantees is therefore rooted in experience. Peacekeeping missions have learned hard lessons from past operations where insufficient safeguards led to casualties or mission paralysis. The credibility of the United Nations depends not only on its willingness to engage, but also on its ability to protect its personnel and uphold its mandate. Deploying observers into an environment where they could be targeted would undermine both objectives. At the same time, the demand for guarantees places responsibility squarely on the conflict parties. It signals that international support for the ceasefire is conditional on genuine cooperation. This approach may serve as a test of commitment. If parties provide the necessary assurances and adhere to them, it could build confidence and open the door to broader political dialogue. If they fail to do so, it would cast doubt on their intentions and potentially harden international attitudes. The situation in the DRC also reflects broader trends in global peacekeeping. Contemporary conflicts often involve non-state actors, asymmetric tactics, and fluid front lines. Traditional peacekeeping models, developed in the context of interstate wars with clear ceasefire lines, are increasingly strained. Missions must adapt to environments where consent is partial, threats are unpredictable, and political processes are fragile. The call for security guarantees illustrates this evolution. Peacekeepers can no longer assume passive acceptance of their presence. Regional diplomacy remains critical. Neighbouring countries and regional organisations have a vested interest in preventing escalation. Cross-border trade, refugee flows and security concerns tie the fate of Eastern Congo to the stability of the wider Great Lakes region. Effective ceasefire monitoring could reduce tensions and foster cooperation. Failure, however, risks entrenching divisions and possibly drawing additional actors into the conflict. Infrastructure challenges also loom large. Damaged roads, closed airports and contested airspace complicate logistics. Monitoring a ceasefire requires mobility, communication, and reliable supply lines. Helicopters may be necessary to reach remote areas, but their use depends on safe airspace. Ground patrols require secure corridors. Establishing these conditions demands coordination and trust that are not easily achieved in an active conflict zone. Ultimately, the success of the ceasefire monitoring effort will hinge on political will. Technical mechanisms, verification teams, and surveillance tools can support peace, but they cannot substitute for genuine commitment from the parties involved. Security guarantees are a tangible expression of that commitment. They represent a willingness to prioritize stability over short-term advantage and to accept international oversight as part of a broader peace process. For the people of Eastern Congo, the stakes could not be higher. Years of conflict have eroded faith in institutions and exhausted communities. Each new agreement brings cautious optimism tempered by experience. Effective monitoring could help transform a fragile truce into a foundation for longer-term peace. It could enable displaced families to return home, revive local economies, and create space for political reforms. But without credible safeguards, the ceasefire risks unravelling, perpetuating a cycle of hope and disappointment. The United Nations stands at a critical juncture in its engagement with the DRC. Its demand for security guarantees is not a retreat, but a recognition of operational realities. By insisting on clear conditions for deployment, the UN seeks to protect its personnel, preserve its credibility, and enhance the likelihood that its monitoring efforts will be meaningful. The coming months will reveal whether the parties to the conflict are prepared to meet those conditions. In a region long scarred by violence, the path to peace is rarely linear. It requires sustained diplomacy, regional cooperation, accountable leadership, and the protection of civilians. Security guarantees for ceasefire monitoring are one piece of this complex puzzle. If honoured, they could mark a step towards stabilisation and renewed trust. If ignored, they will serve as another reminder of the formidable obstacles facing peace in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.